I am standing before you today as someone that was the most unlikely leader. When I was growing up, never had a leadership position, didn't think of myself that way at all. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but I was such an introvert. In fact, the other day, my mom reminded me of a story. I was down the street playing with my friend, Lee Dadisman, and she called my mom and said, can you please come and get Holly? Lee doesn't want to play with her anymore. And my mom thought, oh my gosh, what did she do? And she said, well, she won't play with Lee. She's in Lee's closet organizing it. I just was quiet, thinking about things. You might have found me organizing in the closet, and then never had a leadership position, and really went all the way through high school that way, went out to college, was starting to pursue my degree. And then maybe you can relate to this. A person intersected my path that literally changed the trajectory of my life. Her name was Connie Schoberg, and she was the hall director of the dorm where I lived in college. And as I said, I wasn't in any kind of a leadership position, but I was the roommate of one of the resident advisors. And so Connie had just seen me and gotten to know me, and she called me up and she said, Holly, we have a vacancy for a resident advisor position. Would you step into that role? And I remember feeling so apprehensive. Do I have what it takes? Could I do that? I've never done anything like that before. But I really felt like I'm going to step out and I'm going to give this a try. When I look back on my life, that moment, that one moment of someone seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself, and someone actually giving me that position and letting me begin to flourish in it, I can go back, and everything else that I have done in my life as a leader, it really traces back to that moment. And I began this leadership journey of learning, what does it really mean to lead? What is it? Is it a position? Is it when you've got enough experience under your belt, then you're qualified to be a leader? What I want us to talk about today is that it actually is something that every single one of you in this room can do. And rather us thinking about leadership as some kind of a position, I want us to really talk about our influence. How can we be used to really positively influence another person? So I want you to look at this definition. Influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. And I would argue every single one of you that are here this morning, regardless of your temperament, your personality, your experience, that as you really understand your strengths and what you're able to do, I believe that you can positively influence where you are. So if you wanted to increase your influence, how do you do that? And it all comes down to trust. Really and truly, y'all, as we go through every single day, every encounter that we have, as you begin to know someone gets to know you, then they're really asking that question, do I trust you? Can I trust you? And I'm going to make a suggestion that there are 4 filters that people walk through to decide, am I even going to trust you? And the first one is just your character. You know, are you a person of integrity? And this is a really big question that I think people are always asking. Are you for me or are you for yourself? People want to know that. They want to be with someone that's going to be thinking about them. Secondly, people are just asking, do I like you? And part of what we're going to talk about this morning is how can we learn to really relate to every voice and have our voice heard, because we just can't underestimate the chemistry part of things. We want to find a way to be able to connect with people that are like us or unlike us, and people would know, I actually can connect with you. I like spending time with you. The next piece is competence. At the end of the day, people want to know, are you competent? Can you actually do what you're saying that you're going to do? Do you have a proven track record? And then finally, people are looking at credibility. Have you ever known someone that you think they have the knowledge, they must be really smart, but it is a long step for them to apply that knowledge and for you to think this is actually relevant for me? So when we want to think about how do I build trust? How do I build influence? How do I really build these strong communication and relationships? I want you to think about this sentence. Everyone speaks, but not everyone is heard. Can you relate to that? I can think of myself of being in meetings sometimes. Have you ever sat in a meeting, you had something to say, but you thought, well, everybody else already went first. I think people think that person's more competent, or I'm not sure people think that I have the credibility, and you hold back. Or have you ever been sitting there and you had something to say, but you were almost going around the room and you were thinking, I think they value that person's opinion. I could say something, but I don't know if my voice has any weight in this room. You ever felt that way? And it can just be so, it can almost make us feel shamed or feel like we don't have power or we don't have influence in that room. But I want to talk today about some ways that I believe that we can really unlock not only the power of our voice, but how we can connect with other voices. When every voice around the table isn't heard, I believe that teams function at a fraction of their performance potential. A lot of times team members end up feeling really, really misunderstood. And if we don't delve into that, we are going to be missing so much of the value that all of our teams can bring. We might think everything's okay, but if we peeled back the layer, I'm going to argue that there may be people around your table that are thinking, I'm not sure I trust you, nor do I think you trust me. And there's just a misunderstanding there. The other piece that comes from that is, and I feel like I'm talking to a room full of leaders, when we get in a situation like that, we can run the risk of not really hearing the truth from our people. And when I'm leading and people, I don't really feel like there's a good feedback mechanism and that I can really hear what others need to say, then that is going to be a detriment to my performance as a leader. And here's the piece I want us to really talk about. We can undermine our influence every single day and we don't even realize it. We unwittingly do it. But I want to try to give you some keys today that will help you build your influence instead of decreasing it even without you even knowing it. So we build trust and influence with others by knowing and using our voices wisely. And what would it look like on every team that's represented here today? What would it look like if every voice around that table felt deeply heard, deeply valued, and deeply appreciated? I'm going to make the argument if you create a culture that way, the performance of what your team can accomplish is so much higher than maybe what you're even experiencing now. So as we start this, I think it's so important that we always start our leadership journey by looking at ourselves, right? I've got to lead myself first. So why don't you just take a peek at this infinity loop and we'll kind of walk through this. If I know myself, then I begin to realize there's just certain tendencies, okay? When Holly was 8, she had a tendency to get quiet, read a book, and potentially could be found in a closet organizing, okay? We all just have our tendencies based on our personality, but our tendencies create patterns, how we communicate, how people experience us when they're in relationship with us. And our patterns create actions, and every action that we have results in a consequence, which informs our reality. Now, there's probably a lot of things that you're doing. You're getting a really good result, and I would say keep doing that. But I would say in my own leadership journey, I've had times where I had to really, really stop and think, Holly, what are some of the consequences that you're experiencing right now? Could it be related to some tendencies just based on your God-given wiring that are creating some patterns in communication that are causing people to experience you in a way that doesn't bring out the best in them, and they certainly aren't experiencing the best of me? So one of the filters that I think that we can use for this is something called the 5 voices. And this was created by some friends of mine, Steve Cockram and Jeremy Kubicek. And they had done a lot of work with Myers-Briggs, if you've been familiar with that tool. But sometimes people found that a bit hard to remember and really make it actionable. And so what we've done is be able to map different personalities to 5 key voices. Every single one of you in this room, you speak these voices every day. And you will speak a little bit of each one of them, but there's one of them that is foundational to you. It's the primary voice that you use to communicate, and it's actually the primary voice that you prefer to be communicated to. The problem is not everybody speaks your voice. So as I grow in my maturity, and if my goal is to really help my team collaborate well together, I want to be able to increase the influence that I have with everybody I come in contact with, then I want to be able to harness the power of my voice and be able to use it to even connect better. So we're going to go through each one of these voices. As I go through them, I want you to make a mental note, and you might be thinking, hey, Holly, I think that might be my foundational voice. Now, the first voice is something called the nurturer. The nurturer is the champion of people, relational harmony, and values. You might already be thinking of yourself or maybe somebody that you work with. This is the person that every decision they make, it is filtered through how are people going to respond to this? Who's going to like it? Who's not going to like it? And relational harmony is huge for them. Huge. And they are always wanting to know, what did we say our values are? What are my personal values? What's our team's values? And are we living up to those values? And if they would feel like, I don't think that we're living out our values, that would feel very, very, very uncomfortable for them. So let's talk about a couple of other wonderful things about that nurturer voice. They just intuitively know how an organization is going to react to an idea. They function as relational oil. They just tend to be very natural team players. They love celebrating the achievements of others. It's a fantastic voice to have. Now, if you think that that's your foundational voice, a couple of things that you want to be on the lookout for is because relationships are so important to you, then sometimes to resolve conflict, that's going to feel scary. So you would rather maybe hint at not feeling good about something, or maybe kind of withdraw a little bit, might be a little bit passive aggressive, because it's just hard for you to feel like you're going to get into a confrontation with another person. But they often will undervalue the contribution that they make. So one of the things that we can do for the nurturers that are on our teams is call them out, give them a place to be able to speak, and constantly affirm the value that they bring to the team. Now, the creative voice is the champion of future ideas. So whereas the nurturer voice tends to be a bit more present-oriented, the creative just lives in the future. This happens to be my foundational voice. So they're constantly thinking about future ideas. They're constantly thinking about innovation. Organizational integrity is important to them as well, because they want to deliver on what we said that we would do. To dive into the creative a little bit more, I love this phrase. They are conceptual architects. I want you to think about this. When they're in a meeting, they're hearing this piece of information and this piece of information, and they remember this data point, and they'd read an article about a certain trend, and they begin to just be able to put the pieces together to say, if all these things are true, we could create this. Or what if we thought about solving the problem this way? I always will joke and say, creative does not mean artistic. I cannot draw a straight line, but I have a very, very creative voice, but it comes out in problem solving, because they're gonna think, do you see here where I said can't is not in their vocabulary? That's a great thing. That can also be, you can wear people out around you, but they would say, if we've bumped up into some kind of a problem, if we just think about it some more, there is a creative way for us to overcome this. They often will function as an early warning radar system. They can see opportunities in the future or threats, and they will not settle with the status quo. So that's a good thing. It's great to have a creative on your team. They're going to keep you innovating. They're always thinking, how do you make it better? How do you make it better? What the creative has to be careful for is timing. So I remember I've gotten some coaching in my own life because I could have worked with my team on a project and we had worked on it for a really long time, and the day came to launch it and we might be an hour into the launch. And when I wasn't really thinking about the power of my voice, I might walk up to someone and go, you know what, the next time we do this, let's change this one thing because I think the user interface will be better. Well, what have I just done? I have just crushed the people that are still there trying to work on this particular project. So just like the nurturer needs to make sure that their voice is heard and that they're not holding back, for the creative, timing is everything. You have great ideas. Think about when you share them. Now, the guardian is the champion of due diligence, resources, efficient systems, and processes. This is the person on your team that when you've got this vision, you want to get something done, they're the ones that are thinking, okay, awesome. Did we plan for it in our budget? Do we have the staff to do it? This person's super excited and they think they can get this done in a month. But if you really thought through all the steps that it's going to take, there is no way we can get this done in a really, really good way in less than 90 days, right? Now, I have got a special heart for guardians because this is the least like my voice. So can you see that if I was in a meeting as a creative and the guardian starts asking me a bunch of budget questions and timing questions, if I'm not aware of the value of that guardian voice, what am I thinking? I'm going, well, you're just a wet blanket, right? You just rained on my parade and I'm not really happy about it. What I've learned is that the issue is not the guardian. The issue was the guardian was not given the information that they needed to get on board with the idea, and we did not make space for that guardian to ask their questions. So one of the best things that you can do is, if you've got a guardian on your team, is how are you making space for that person to be able to get information, to ask those questions, that you'd really welcome it, because they have a relentless commitment to ask the difficult questions that need to be asked, right? Sometimes you've got a room full of very visionary people. They're very excited about what's going on. A couple of months ago, I was doing this workshop for a startup tech company in downtown Atlanta. They're very innovative, very creative. And with this particular team, there was only one guardian on the team. And I asked him, I said, how does it feel in a team meeting? And he said, sometimes I feel like I'm the only adult in the room. Not a fun way to go to work every day. So they want to detach decision-making from personal sentiments. They really want to step back and say, have we done our homework? Do we have all the information that we need to make a good decisions? They respect value, logic, orders, systems. And here's the thing, a repeatable process. One of the reasons that they challenge us with questions is they're thinking, if we make this decision, is it repeatable? Is this going to be something that's sustainable, that we can continue to deliver on in the future? So I would really just encourage you, if you are that guardian voice, to really own that voice. Your team needs you. We need you on that team. My caution to the guardian is, so much of how people experience you, it's not that you don't have great questions to ask, it's the tone. It's the tone. I was consulting with an organization just last week, and there's someone on that team that is incredibly smart, so bright, everybody knows it, but the way that she asks her questions, what happens is, instead of people feeling like I'm getting good questions, people feel like they're being interrogated. And there's a difference between being asked a well-crafted question and feeling like you're being interrogated. So guardians, ask your questions, be thinking about your tone. Now, the next voice is the connector voice. And the connector voice, while similar to the nurturer, they are much broader in their relationships. Maybe that nurturer wants to go really deep and think about how they're caring and nurturing for relationships. The connector, their relational network goes wide and far, and they are sincere. They might introduce you as one of their dearest friends in the world, and you're thinking, I really didn't even realize you thought of me that way. And they may introduce 223 people that way, but they are sincere. They really value connections. They might be in a new role, and they have still stayed in touch with somebody from 20 years ago. And if they saw that person again, it'd be like they just saw them yesterday. They can keep that relational networks. They're great at collaboration. So for them, their filter is, if we can get the right people around the table and if we would really collaborate together, there's nothing that we can't do. They often are incredible communicators and will often can really fill that role to communicate behalf on a team. So to dig a little bit deeper, as I just mentioned, they're persuasive and inspirational communicators. They can really rally people around a cause, right? They stand up and speak, and all of a sudden everybody's going, yes, sign me up. I want to do that. I want to volunteer for that project. I want to be on that team. They're so resourceful. They're the ones that are sitting in a meeting, you're trying to solve a problem, and they're going to be the ones that are going to go, oh, I know somebody. I was on a plane, had this great conversation on a plane last week, and I met this guy that's this really good web developer. I can totally call him and he'll help us, because he's thinking he's just constantly has this relational network. This person has the capacity to maintain a large number of relationships. They really can connect people and their aspirations, which are all such gifts to a team. The thing that the connector has got to be careful with is it is very hard for them to separate their idea from who they are as a person. So what happens is they can tend to get easily offended. So you're in a meeting, the team is talking, they've shared this idea that they just think, in the words of my grandmother, is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they are so excited about it. And then somebody starts asking a question, and instead of them being able to say they're questioning my idea, they feel like you're questioning me, right? So they've got to really grow in their maturation of how can I hear and engage fully with critical feedback. And then our last of the 5 voices is the pioneer. And the name kind of gives you an idea or a hint of what this voice is like. They're all about strategic vision, very results focused, and they also intend to be incredible problem solvers. So some of their characteristics are they approach life with anything is possible. So for them, they're just thinking, I've got this dream, I've got this idea, maybe this has never been done before, or maybe the person that was doing it before just did not do a good job, but I'm on the scene now and this is what we're gonna do. I've got a vision, charge, take the hill, we're gonna get it done. They almost have strategic military thinking. And the way that it works is they know this vision that they want to get to, and they can align people and resources and systems. It's almost, if any of you have ever had the chance to go to London and visit the Churchill War Rooms, I'm such a history buff. I remember visiting those and going in the map room, and they talk to you about how Churchill and how these other leaders would sit in that room, and they're looking at that map of Europe and strategically thinking, how are they going to fight in World War II? This is this pioneer. They approach life with, I'm going to strategically think through how to align people and resources. Winning is a massive driver, and it's something they have to own about themselves. They're a little bit, go big or go home. If I'm going to do it, I want to be good at it, and I want to win at it. They're powerful communicators, but here's the thing. What the pioneer has to watch out for is if they're not really thinking about, how am I building trust? How do I make sure that people know? Do you remember back at the beginning, I said people want to know, are you for me or are you for yourself? Then an immature pioneer can come across almost arrogant. Like kind of, hey, get on board with my plan, and either get on board with me or we don't need you on the team. But then what can happen is they can quickly dismiss the contributions of people they don't think are competent. So I always tell those that I'm working with that have a pioneer voice, I said, here's the thing. Whether you realize it or not, you are sitting in a meeting, and whether you voiced it as people are talking, in your mind, you're going, you're competent. I don't think you're competent. I agree with you. I don't agree with you. And while you may or may not be right, having that filter is going to hinder people being willing to talk and to share with you. So one really practical thing that I talk to teams about, some rules for engagement in a meeting is if you're the pioneer, go last. Ask the nurture or the creative that's on your team as you start out a meeting, would you like to share? What ideas do you have? Because what you have to realize is that pioneer voice is so powerful that if you always go first, there are many people in the room, they will never share their idea. They will never tell you what they're really thinking because you've already declared what you think. Make sense? So this is really, really interesting. So when you look at people all around the world, now it might be different on subcultures of particular teams, but if you just look at the general population, I want y'all to look at this. Do you see the nurture's about 43% of the world? The guardian is 30%. So I want you to think about it. Remember, those were the two voices that are very present-oriented. So I'm in a room full of leaders, and it may be that many of you are more pioneers or connectors or creative, and you're all about the future. The thing that you have to realize is 75% of the people that you're communicating with, they don't think like you. They don't process information like you do. And so we've got to really take that into consideration as we're thinking, how do I communicate my message? How do I do it? What information am I sharing? And I also want to challenge you with this. Sometimes people think there is a message that needs to be shared, and people make the decision on who should share it based on the position that that person has. Well, that person's the CEO, they make the decision. That person's the executive director of that organization. That person is the leader of the team. And while sometimes that may be appropriate, I'm going to challenge you that the very best leaders think what message needs to be communicated and who is in the audience. So let me give you an example for this. At my prior position, one of my responsibilities was to figure out what we were doing for benefits. And I had made a decision for a variety of reasons that we were going to change our medical insurance provider. I really felt like it was the right decision to make. But as you can imagine, for some people on our staff, that was really going to be a big change. Am I going to have my same doctor? Can I go to the same hospital? Whatever that might be. There was a person on my team that nurture is her foundational voice. And I worked with her on this project. And when it became time to roll this new benefits plan out, I did not make that announcement. I did not lead that. I asked the nurture on my team to stand up and walk through the new benefits program. Because you know why? Because all the people on the team, if they thought that she thought it was a good idea, and they knew that Lindsay would always look out for them, then they would accept the idea. That's why, you guys, there's just no place for ego in the life of a leader. It colors our decisions. I could have pushed through and said, it's within my right to make that announcement and I'm going to do it, but I would have gotten less than optimal results when really the right thing for me to do was to empower another voice to deliver that message. So as you're thinking about processing this information, you're always thinking through what's my voice, how do people experience it, and what is the right voice to communicate the message to the group of people. So what would it look like? How would your team completely transform if every voice around your table was truly heard, truly valued, and truly appreciated? If you've enjoyed today's workshop, then I would love to connect with you. I would love to have a conversation with you, learn more about you, your team, and how you think that you can incorporate some of this learning. What would it look like if you could help every person on your team discover and leverage their leadership voice? What would it look like if every person on your team could get 100% healthy and then turn around and multiply that health in others? I think it could be transformational to your culture, transformational to you achieving the mission and vision of your organization. So please visit hollisstrategies.com, and I hope I'll get to talk to you soon. It would be an honor to serve you.